Shalom, everybody. The issue of Gaza is on everybody's mind, especially after the murder of 6 hostages in the hands of Hamas. As the IDF was pursuing them, trying to liberate them, they were murdered in cold blood. Ironically, a lot of the criticism actually fell on Prime Minister Netanyahu for not doing enough to secure their release through some kind of deal. Yesterday, the Prime Minister decided that it was important for him to speak in the English language and give a press conference to explain his position on why Israel should continue the fight in Gaza and how the presence of the IDF in the Philadelphia corridor is a must, in his opinion. I thought to myself that this is something that has to be brought to the public, a very important policy speech by the Prime Minister explaining his position. So let's watch it together, and we'll pause from time to time for some background or maybe some criticism or maybe some support. But one of the hottest issues in our time is the story of Gaza. And here's the man behind the policy of dealing with the aftermath of October 7th, Prime Minister Netanyahu at a press conference in English last night.
Good evening. Israel is experiencing days of horror, sorrow, and rage. A week ago, we experienced such horror. Yesterday, I visited in Ashkelon the family of one of the hostages murdered in cold blood. A day earlier, I spoke to several of the families of these murdered hostages. It tears your heart out. I said to them that I'm sorry. I apologize that we didn't get them out. We worked so hard to get them. We were close, but we didn't. And they changed the torment. Our families worried about their loved ones, to families grieving for their fallen beloved. That sentiment I know, because I belong to that family, but it's a horror. We also lost brave policemen and brave soldiers who are fighting in the Gaza front. And I embrace their families as well.
I just want to make it clear that when he says we lost police officers, there was a gangland style gunning down of Israeli police officers not far from where I'm sitting right now in Tarkumia, which is close to Hebron. And these police officers were just driving to work and they were shot dead. And so Israel in one day experienced the aftermath of the murder of the 6 hostages and then 3 police officers. So it was really a very, very pressurized and very bitter day here in Israel. That's what he's talking about.
All our people do. On October 7th, we experienced the worst savagery in this century. On October 7th, we experienced the worst savagery meted on the Jewish people since the Holocaust. These savages massacred our people, 1,200 civilians. They beheaded our men. They raped our women and then murdered them. They burned babies alive. They took 255 of our people hostages to their underground dungeons.
And I just want to pause and say that there's so many people who deny these crimes, and that is so classic. Just like the Nazis denied their crimes, and just like in 1929, after the massacre here in Hebron, the perpetrators and their families denied it, and that's what we're facing here as well. We're facing a denial. So I could see right now, so many Israel haters being like, no, there was no babies burned. There's no proof of that. There's no rapes. There's no anything like that. Israel made it up. In fact, most of them were killed by the Hannibal Initiative, and therefore just Israel killed them. The whole thing's a fake. And that is such a big narrative out there today. And I think that's why the prime minister himself made this press conference to start to unpack those lies and to put the truth out there.
That's a horror that the world saw and responded to initially. It's important that we remember it. But we were given a reminder, a terrible reminder. Last week, when these savages murdered 6 of our hostages in cold blood, they riddled them with bullets, then they shot each of them in the head, some of them several times. And these are the savages, these are the terrorists that Iran implanted next to our border, as elsewhere. And we're committed to defeating them, to extirpating this evil from our midst.
I want to stop here for a second and point out that Prime Minister Netanyahu has been talking about the evils of Iran for at least 25 years. I remember him speaking about it at AIPAC when I was there 25 years ago. And I have to say right from the onset that while I agree with the sentiments that Prime Minister Netanyahu is going to say throughout this press conference, I also want to say you should have not allowed Iran to plant these agents and elements of efforts to destroy Israel. You should have not allowed that to happen. We should have never gotten to this situation. We should have never given away Gaza. We should have never allowed Iran to come to our doorstep in South Lebanon and now coming through Jordan or Yemen. And we should use this opportunity to strike hard at Iran, at the Houthis, at Hezbollah, at Hamas, and not wait around for international permission. And had we acted faster, we'd be in better shape. I agree with his sentiment that Iran is behind us and that's the bad guy. But I also point a finger and say, hey, you knew this was coming for a long time, and yet you did not react and prepare us properly. And these people that are savages would have been just as savage if they could have in 1967 and 1973 and 1948. But the fact is we defended ourselves. That's the key here, not their savagery, but our strong defense. And so here's my critique of Prime Minister Netanyahu, although I agree with the sentiment of this press conference.
I want to talk to you today about some of the things that we must do to achieve that goal, including the questions of the Philadelphia Corridor. But before I do that, I want to give your readers and viewers some context, because often you see maps of Israel, you think it's a Goliath. Well, I'd like to give you first an overview of where Israel is. This is the Middle East, and this is the entire Arab world.
Okay, I'm just going to say that this thing that he's doing right now is one of the most important things. And I am so happy that the Prime Minister took the time to lay this out. It's so important. This map that he's showing should be shown at every discussion about Israel, every time. Not talk about our democracy, not talk about our morality, but talk about our tininess within the broader Arab region. This is the truth. This is what we're living in. We're living in a tiny Jewish state defending itself as a minority from a majority. Now, not everybody is hostile, not everybody's jihadist, but a lot are. And so this is such an important lesson. And I'm so glad that the Prime Minister took the time to explain this. And we should be always using this. This is absolutely a key analysis and understanding. If you have it the other way, that you believe that Israel is this giant country and the Palestinians are these little tiny victims, well, you've fallen prey to the propaganda, the anti-Israel propaganda. This little map, this big map with the little Israel inside, is the truth and the reality that we face out here. We are basically a nation state defending itself, our minority, from a majority in this region. And the only way to do it is to stay strong and to hold on to your borders and not to succumb and to shrink, Because if you shrink, the jihad is like, we're going to swallow you up in toto. So here's the prime minister giving such an important contextualizing of the reality of Israel.
And this is Israel. It's one of the world's tiniest countries. I give it the thumb test. This is a big one, so you need a bigger thumb. But it's a tiny country. It's one of the tiniest countries on the planet. It's, I think, 1/10 of 1% of the territory of the Arab world. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it's 2/10 of 1%. It goes from the river is right here, that's the Jordan River, to the sea, the Mediterranean Sea. So when Hamas is talking about liberating Palestine from the river to the sea, basically what they're saying is destroy Israel. And the entire width of this is probably around the width of the Washington Beltway. It's all together, it's its widest point, about 50 miles, right here. Tiny. And here's Gaza there. This is the red thing that you see here. That's Gaza. Now I want to zoom in. When I zoom in, remember how tiny this is. Remember the distances here. Now take a look. Here it is enlarged. This is Israel. This is the Mediterranean Sea. The Jordan River is right here. This is Egypt and the Sinai Desert. Now look at Gaza. Where is Gaza? Gaza is implanted in this tiny country, 30 miles from Tel Aviv, 40 miles from our capital, Jerusalem, 30 miles from Beersheba. These are three of Israel's largest cities. Gaza is within spitting distance to them.
Notice, by the way, how this Gaza is sitting as such a tiny little island within Israel, and how it is so aesthetically obvious, so kind of physically and aesthetically obvious that you can't have a different country in the middle of your country, right? You got to govern that piece of land. You can't have the bad guys govern it because it's within your land. And if you give it over and you let them build up a jihadism in there, look at those arrows. Look where it leads us. It leads us to be constantly endangered. So, it's got to kind of come to you like, even I call it even on an aesthetic level, which is like, do you really think that Israel should have this like missing tooth? Like, look at the border, and then suddenly there's like this part that's cut out, and your haters are living there? That's not going to work.
Israel, up to the disengagement agreement of 2005, Israel controlled this border under an agreement with Egypt after the Camp David peace accords. We controlled this part, which is called the Philadelphia corridor. I'll talk to you about that in a minute. Right down to Eilat in the Red Sea. This was our border. And while there was, I would say, a minimal amount of terrorism, we didn't really face a big problem. Let's zoom in on that a bit more. Here's Gaza Strip enlarged. Again, this is the situation in Gaza before the disengagement of 2005. And the Gaza Strip is firmly under Israeli control. We control the maritime border. You can't smuggle in weapons. They tried, but we stopped it. You control the land border, and you control this border between the Sinai Desert, Egypt, and Gaza, the Gaza Strip. It's controlled. This is the Philadelphia corridor. This is the Rafah crossing, controlled by the IDF. Now look at the distances from Gaza. It's 4 miles to another city in Israel called Ashkelon, where I visited that bereaved family yesterday. It's a population of 170,000 people. They're 4 miles away. But some of our communities, like Kibbutz Be'eri, which was one of the hardest hit, is 1 mile away from Gaza. Kfar Aza is less than 1 mile away. It's literally walking distance, okay? And so as long as we control this, these communities, sometimes they were harassed by this rocket or that rocket, but it was marginal. We controlled the security situation. But something happened in 2005. Israel unilaterally disengaged from Gaza. It just went out. It took out everything. It took out the army. It stripped, uprooted communities, took out 10,000 people. The army left the Philadelphia corridor. Here's what happened.
So the only question is like, and Prime Minister Netanyahu is not going to touch it, which is, Why did it do that? And why did he himself vote for the disengagement? I think what he's saying is, which is just so obvious to me, which is that was really dumb. Don't give away security control to the jihad. Don't kick your people out of Gaza. That's ancestral land and important security land. And don't do that, because if you do that and you take away the idea from the Philadelphia corridor, then they're going to smuggle in arms. We'll hear more about that. But the kind of missing verbiage here is like, yeah, and that was dumb. We should have not done that. We should have not left Gaza. We've done that, and we did that 17 years ago, 18 years ago now, and it's been an utter disaster, not what we thought was going to happen. But I think he's going to explain it even a little bit more. But just keep that in mind, which is like, yeah, we got to roll back that mistaken policy.
This is Gaza after the disengagement. And Hamas now has a weapon smuggling operation nurtured by Iran, financed by Iran, supplied by Iran, delivered by Iran. And here's what happened. That Philadelphia corridor became completely porous. The other borders controlled by us. But once this was perforated, even though the policy of Egypt was to prevent it, it didn't necessarily work. It didn't succeed. And this border, once we left our side of the Philadelphia corridor, rockets went in, missiles went in, drones went in, ammo went in, weapons manufacturing equipment came in, tunnel drilling equipment came in. Once we got out, once we left the Philadelphia corridor, Iran could carry out its plan to turn Gaza into a base, a terrorist enclave that would endanger not only the communities around it, but would endanger Tel Aviv, Jerusalem, Beersheba, the entire country of Israel. It became a huge terrorist base because we left that corridor. So we vowed, or I would say all this, you have to understand that the centrality of the Philadelphia corridor to the arming of Gaza, to the arming of Hamas, and this all led to the October 7th massacre, which Hamas has vowed, proudly vowed, to do again and again and again. We vowed that they won't be able to do it. So we set, as far as Gaza is concerned, 3 war goals. The first war goal was to destroy Hamas's military and governing capabilities. The second was to free our hostages. And the third was to ensure that Gaza never again poses a threat to Israel. And all...
I'm not exactly sure what the difference between number 1 and number 3 is. You're saying you want to get rid of Hamas, okay, and then you want to make sure that Gaza doesn't pose a threat anymore. Well, what does that mean? Does that mean that you never... What is the separation here that Netanyahu says destroy Gaza, destroy Hamas, and also number 3, never allow any force like Hamas to take over? Is that the meaning of what he's saying? I hope that's what it means. I'm not sure that's what it means, but I think that's what he's saying, that we are never again going to allow a force like that. If it's the PA or Al Qaeda or who knows what else, we're not going to let them take over. And then nestled in there is the issue of the hostages. To me, the hostages are not on the same level, because the hostages may very well be dead. And also, if you're fighting as though you're trying to rescue hostages, you may not fight with all of your gusto, because you may be trying too hard to make sure that they don't get hurt. So, and you may be making deals with the devil. So that part is problematic. But 1 and 2, I can definitely understand. 1 and 3, I can understand. Number 2, I'm not sure that rescuing the hostages is commensurate with those other goals. I think you have to say, 1, we're going to destroy Hamas. 2, we're never going to allow any force to take over. 3, we're going to govern this land because that's the only way to do it. And 4, we're going to resettle it. The hostages, to put them as number 2, I'm not sure that that's a good fighting technique.
3 of those goals, all 3 of them, go through Israel's control of the Philadelphia corridor. And it's obvious why. You want to destroy Hamas's military and governing capabilities, you can't let Hamas rearm. It's obvious. So you have to control the corridor. You can't let them have, by the way, it's not only to prevent them from terrorizing us, attacking us, it's also to prevent Hamas or any other terrorist organization from terrorizing the people of Gaza. Gaza cannot have a future if Gaza remains porous and you can enable rearmament of terrorists through the Philadelphia corridor.
All right, so this is an important point, which he doesn't get back to much, which is that many Gazans are pro-jihad, and yet there are those who are not. The jihad is extremely oppressive of the local population, and they also brainwash them, and they steal their money and their food, and they're extremely oppressive. There are many Gazans who are pro-jihad. There's no doubt about that. And there were many so-called civilians who were part of the looting, raping, killing, all the stuff. And right now, the Israeli government thinks there was about 6,000 people who took part in the October 7th, the jihad attack. So that's an important point, though, that the prime minister makes, which is like Israel should be also promulgating itself as a liberator of those who don't want jihadist rule in their life.
The second thing is to release the hostages. First of all, you can't prevent, if you leave this corridor, you can't prevent Hamas from not only not smuggling weapons in, you can't prevent them from not smuggling terrorists, hostages out. It's walking distance, nothing. They can easily smuggle hostages out here to the Sinai Desert in Egypt. They disappear. It's crossing distance. The distance is nothing. It's meters away. They cross the barrier above ground. They don't even have to go underground. They disappear in the Sinai, and then they end up in Iran or in Yemen. They're gone forever. And you need something to squeeze them, to prevent them, to put pressure on them to release the remaining hostages. So if you want to release the hostages, you've got to control the Philadelphia corridor. And the third goal of ensuring that we prevent Gaza from...
I don't think he made the argument very clearly why the Philadelphia corridor is going to release the hostages. I think the argument is very clear that if you don't hold on to this corridor, then there's a porous opening towards the Sinai and you could escape with those hostages. But that doesn't mean you're going to liberate them necessarily. But if they don't escape, but I guess what he meant to say is you have a better chance of getting to them if they're not now in Iran or somewhere else. I understand that.
Being again a threat to Israel, it's clear Gaza must be demilitarized. And it can only be demilitarized if the Philadelphia corridor remains under firm control and is not a supply line for armaments and for terror equipment.
Right. What he's not willing to say, what I'm willing to say is that the only way to really take care of this place is by actually Israel governing Gaza. Why can't we just say that? We have to govern this place. That's the only way to do it. And if we don't govern it, then the jihadists will. So he's saying, listen, we have to govern the Philadelphia corridor because that's the poorest entranceway of all the armament and the escape and the money for the jihadis and for the Hamas and all that. Okay, that makes sense. But what about the rest of it? You want that whole society to be suckled on the milk of anti-Semitism? No, we have to control that small piece of land within our small piece of land.
I think that's clear to most Israelis, to all Israelis. But a question has arisen. That may be the case. But why don't you leave Gaza for 42 days? You could come back. Well, aside from what I said, that they could smuggle the terrorists out, wait a minute. Come back. I want to show you what they've got under Gaza. I didn't show you that. So I want to show you that. This is what they have under the Philadelphia corridor. Just so you understand the supply lines we're talking about. This is one of the tunnels there. Look at the engineering. Look at the investment here. Look at what they've got. We've got dozens of such tunnels underneath the Philadelphia corridor. To give you an impression of the size of these things, this is a soldier. This is a tunnel. You could drive a truck through this. Yeah, indeed, you could. Here's a truck. Or it's a Humvee. This is a huge, huge problem. Now you're just going to walk away. It's obvious.
I just want to ask Prime Minister Netanyahu my tough question for you, and maybe it's not the time for it, but my question is for you. How did you allow this stuff to be built underneath our nose? To build such a thing, you need trucks and trucks of cement. You need experts from either China or Russia, or I don't think Iran, but maybe, I don't know, Iran or North Korea. It's like, how did you allow this infrastructure of our death to be built underneath our noses? How could that be? That's something that really bothers me to no end. It's one of two options. It's either you didn't know, or our intelligence community didn't know, or you knew but you didn't care for some reason, or you didn't prepare. So therefore, it's either you knew, which is really bad, or you did know, which is really bad. And that's just a side issue. That doesn't take away for a second from the fact that these are the bad guys or the jihadis, and they've got to be crushed. But I just put the question back to you, which is, how could we have allowed such a thing to happen? We must have some kind of problem in the way we do things and see things if we allow such infrastructure of hate to be built up right underneath our nose in the kind of quadrant which is adjacent to us, which is really part of our land, which was once, very short time ago, part of our land.
You have to control it, right? I think once you see this, you understand that. But then the next question is, okay, you leave and you come back. That's what they tell us, okay? We'll have complete international legitimacy to come back. Sorry, we've gone down that route. We're down that route when we left Lebanon, and people said, you can leave Lebanon and you can come back. The first time they fire a rocket, you can come back. The world will support you. It didn't. And we've been out of Lebanon for 24 years. They said the same thing when we left Gaza in the disengagement. They said, you can leave. And the first rocket, I remember Prime Minister Sharon said this to me. First rocket, above ground or below ground. We'll be able to.
I have a phrase about this, which I say, which is, courage and strong action does not follow cowardice. You walk away from your land, you give it away to the bad guys, you make a stupid move, you don't listen to the people. And you're like, if they ever even shoot one rocket at us, then everything will be, we'll smash them, we'll crush them, we'll destroy them. No. You made a cowardly move. You left your land. And so you're probably not going to follow it up with an awesomely courageous move that's going to undermine the move that you just made. You kicked Jews out of their house. You empowered the jihad. You gave them land. You looked the other way. And then when they shot rockets, you were like, okay, next time we'll really smash them. But at the end, it's like, feed me, see more. You know what I'm talking about? Like Little Shop of Horrors. You keep feeding that monkey. You keep feeding that jihad, the jihadist monkey, and it keeps growing like a monster in your midst.
Go back in. It's been 20 years, we haven't gone back in. Because you all know and understand that the international community, including friendly countries under enormous domestic pressure because of the propaganda that's leveled against Israel and against them, there'll be enormous international pressure not to come back. What is their message? End the war, end the war. And so when we want to come back and resume, we'll pay an exorbitant price in many fields, including in the lives of our men. To come back, it's not just a military question. It's a military, political, strategic question. And we make that decision. We're not going to leave. 42 days, we're there. I don't want to leave in order to come back in when I know that we didn't come back in.
That's
and
right.
It's not going to take another 24 years to come back in. And God.
Also, when you leave and come back in, you know what happens? The bad guys rearm themselves, and then more Jewish soldiers die. For God's sakes, isn't that obvious? If you walk out when they are in the middle of a war and you're like, okay, we're going to take a recess now, then they're going to fill their all their lines with new guns and new bombs and rebuild and medical stuff, and they're going to rearm. You don't give a chance for the enemy to rearm in a war. That's like one of the ways to beat them in a war is that you've outsupplied them. You've cut out their supply lines. You cut off the supply lines. It's so obvious. You don't make sure that the supply lines are over so that they can rearm. That's obvious. So I think that when it comes to this issue of holding on to the Philadelphia corridor and making sure that it is not a porous corridor that the enemy can rearm through, I think that's 100% right.
God knows what price we'll have, how many more massacres, how many more kidnappings, how many more hostages, how many more rapes. It's not going to happen. So people said, yeah, but if you stay, this will kill the deal. And I say, such a deal will kill us. And there won't be a deal that way. This is a false narrative. I'm willing to make a deal. I made one already. One that brought back 150 hostages, 117 alive. And I'm committed to return the remaining 101. I'll do everything I can to get them in. But leaving Philadelphia does not advance the release of the hostages.
So this is where I run into a problem. Can you really prosecute a war with making the release of the hostages an equal footing of a war goal? I don't think so. And I think here we have to be more honest and to say, not just honestly, but also with courage and say, listen, the hostages are a tool of war against us, and we've got to look away. As horrible as that sounds, we have to look away and not fight as though it's all about rescuing them. We have to fight as though they are, I'm sad to say it, like they are lost. We have to fight this war to make sure that there's never a hostage situation again. And if some of them come out alive, great. Big bonus. But that can't be the war goal, because if you fight like that, you're not going to fight to achieve the other goals, which are the more important goals. Why are they the more important goals? To destroy Hamas and make sure that Hamas-like entity doesn't take over ever again. Because if you don't do that, then it could just happen again. And I just need to remind everybody, it was Prime Minister Netanyahu who released 1,000 terrorists for one Gilad Shalit. And in the end, Gilad Shalit came out, and yet those terrorists started killing Jews immediately. And they killed 7, 8, 9, 10 Jews in the first few months, murdered people, right? So we released one hostage, but 10 people got murdered. And then guess what? The people that were released, the terrorists, became the heads, like Sinwar, of the October 7th massacre. So we have to make policy that has a future-oriented outlook. And that's what I don't understand when he says, like, it's an equal, a co-goal is to rescue the hostages. It just seems to me it undermines the other goals of the war.
Because the deal cannot be advanced. They'll give you a minor part, if they give anything. Keep the rest. Go and argue. You know when they started giving us hostages? When we went into Philadelphia, when we went into Rafah, when we controlled the Rafah crossing. That's when they felt the pressure. As long as they didn't feel the pressure, they wouldn't do it. The first batch, the first deal that we got was a result of our invasion, the military pressure we put in. They gave us the hostages. After that, they thought, well, we'll have the international pressure turn on Israel, so we won't have to make any concessions. But after Rafah, their tune changed. And they began to change. If we leave Rafah, if we leave the Philadelphia corridor, there won't be any
It's
pressure.
important to understand that the Philadelphia corridor and Rafah are neighbors. Rafah is the town that sits adjacent to the Philadelphia corridor. It's through Rafah, through tunnels throughout the houses, that stuff goes into Sinai. And right there is that corridor that can block it off. So I think it's pretty obvious what he's saying. We got to keep fighting. We got to keep the pressure on. Maybe, and this is the way he should say it, maybe we'll get some hostages back, but nobody promises that. The most important thing is that we can never again allow this thing to happen. And we're going to have to stay. So that is, I think, his major push here, which is like Israel is going to stay in Rafah and in the Philadelphia corridor.
We won't get the hostages. I said I'm willing to make a deal. The real obstacle to making a deal is not Israel. And it's not me. It's Hamas. It's Sinwar.
Why do we have to have this deal talk? I don't understand this. Why do we have to have this deal talk? Well, who's there to make a deal with? Why don't you be like, what would Putin say? Would Putin say, like, I want to make a deal? I'm not an obstacle to a deal. Why don't you be like, there's no deal? Because we're not, at the end of this, there's nobody to deal with because we're going to destroy our organization in toto. Do you understand how, like, making a deal with an organization that you also say you want to totally destroy? See how that doesn't work? Deal means you're dealing with somebody. Let's not deal with them. There's no deal to be made with them. Let's destroy them and make sure that we never have to make a deal again. So this is where I get confused and where I think it's wishy-washy.
April 27th, I put forward a proposal by Israel, which Secretary Blinken called extremely generous. On May 31st, having met Blinken again, I said we agreed to the US-backed proposal, and Hamas refused. On August 16th, the US brought forth what they call the final bridging proposal. Again, we accepted, Hamas refused. On August 19th, Secretary Blinken said, Israel accepted the US proposal, now Hamas has to do the same. On August 28th, that's a week ago, the deputy CIA director said, Israel showed seriousness in the negotiations, now Hamas must make the deal. This was last week. So I ask you, what has changed? What has changed in this week? What's changed is that they murdered 6 of our hostages in cold blood. Now the world will seriously demand that Israel make concessions after this massacre?
Well, I mean, you're the one who's saying that you're willing so much to make a deal. Why don't you never talk about a deal? And then you'll never face that kind of pressure. Be like, there's no deal. There's never going to be a deal. There's nobody to deal with. These are our enemies. They are here to destroy us, and we're going to destroy them. So that's not going to happen. There's no deal. And then you're surprised, Prime Minister Netanyahu, where there's pressure from the international community. I don't know for what reason. Maybe because they feel bad for the Arabs, or maybe because they want to destroy Israel. Who knows what? But the bottom line is just say to them, there is no deal. Not like I am a really rational actor and I want to make a deal. Be like, no, we're done. We're not going to have neo-Nazis on our borders who are arming to destroy us. It's over. There's no deal with these guys. And if you would say that with clarity, then nobody's going to demand any kind of deal from you, I think.
What message does this send to Hamas? I'll tell you what the message is. Murder more hostages, you'll get more concessions. That's not only illogical, it's not only immoral, it's downright insane. So it's not going to happen. We have red lines. Before the murder, they haven't changed. We'll hold to them. But we also have had flexibility. And I'll tell you one thing, Hamas will pay for this. That you can be assured. We'll make sure that we extract them, that price from them. But we are firm on our red lines, including the Philadelphia corridor, for the reasons I described here. I'm flexible where I can be. I'm firm when I have to be.
Yeah, I would just be like, I would make the red line like Hamas is the red line. Like, we're not going to have these people next to us anymore. We're done with that. You know, they did this. They did this horrible thing. It's like, and we're done with them. They are our enemies. We're at war. We're going to destroy them. There's no deal to be made. That's what happens. That's called a deal with the devil. Do not make a deal with the devil. Do not make a deal with the devil. No deal. We're here for war. And the deal will be with Arabs who hate jihadists and want to live in Israel as pro-Israel, pro-Jewish state Arabs. Okay, maybe there's a deal there. There's no deal with Hamas. Come on.
There's the possibility of getting this deal if we stick to this strategy. I said before, we got 150 hostages out because we combined a firm stance with military pressure. And I said that Hamas, after that, relied on international pressure, but it had weakened. And then we went into Rafah and the Philadelphia corridor, so it got strengthened. And they were beginning to balk. A condition that they said they'd never accept, a red line, is that we must commit to getting out of Gaza and enabling Hamas basically to take over Gaza again. End the war, get out, let them retake Gaza. That's obviously something we couldn't do. They said there'll never be a deal. Well, they started caving in there after we took the Philadelphia corridor. And then they started backing off. You know why they waited?
You know, I'm listening to what he's saying, and I'm just getting confused. I'm like, who said what with the who? Oh, when you put the pressure, then the US, yes, agree, but then the international, it just becomes convoluted. Make it simple for people. People are used to watching sports. There's the team that they root for and the team that they don't root for, okay? Make it simple for people. We're going to destroy this organization. The land is ours. We're the only ones who can govern it. Pro-Israel Arabs can stay and live in peace. That's the opportunity. Make it simple for people. They started caving, but we're going to extract the price. Now the international community is this or that. It just becomes convoluted. Let's make it easy for people. Let's make it easy for people to understand. And let's make it truthful, which is these are not people that you can make a deal with. That's my opinion.
Why they started backing off? Because they waited for Iran to start a general war with Israel. That didn't happen. So then they waited for Hezbollah to start a general war with Israel. That didn't happen either. So now they resort to the final tactic. They're going to sow discord and create international pressure, again using the hostages, even after the murder. And this is something that's not new because they started this a year ago. You should see this. I mean, this is their tactic. This is Hamas orders for psychological.
Okay, I can't disagree with this. This is 100% true. There is a psychological warfare against Israel, and it is using the international community, and it is part of their game plan. And here he is going to lay it out to you.
Psychological warfare found in Hamas underground command post on January 29th. That's right after the beginning of the war, 2024. And this is the original document in Arabic. Our soldiers found it. And here's what it says. Push photos and videos of hostages. Put it out in the media. Because that creates enormous psychological pressure. Who's not affected by it? Any human being seeing these souls, these girls, these people, young people from those dungeons, you're affected by it. Second, increase psychological pressure on defense minister. Third, continue blaming Netanyahu. And fourth, claim ground operation will not release hostages. That's Hamas's that's not only their talking points, it's their strategy. And their idea is this will sow internal discord and increase international pressure on Israel. That's what
this is a powerful condemnation and realization and revelation of how Hamas operates. They understand the psychological forces at play, and therefore they're going to use the hostages. And that's why, again, I said earlier, like, the hostages should have been taken out of the equation, but they're going to use the hostages. And that was their whole thing. Getting hostages was part of their whole war effort from the get-go. It was to rape and kill, but also to get living hostages. So hostages, I would have added one more point there, which is first get hostages, then push photos and videos of hostages, then increase psychological pressure on the defense minister using this kind of stuff, then continue blaming Netanyahu. He's the problem. 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 Make him the problem, and then that creates internal discord in the country. It's like your prime minister. He's the problem. And also, as he says, claim ground operation will not release the hostages. Of course not. There's only one way to release the hostages, which is negotiate with the devil, right? That is part of the way that they're thinking about this, and that's in documents that were found on terrorists and on the tables, that were sitting around in these tunnels. So I think that in this case, I have to agree with the prime minister very much, which is like this is their playbook. Their playbook is to use psychology more than just warfare. Warfare was the initial stage. The next stage is psychology. Make it hurt, make it bleed, and make the international world put a lot of pressure on Israel. That is the way they're operating, and they're doing it successfully.
They hope to achieve. And they think this will happen. Well, it won't happen. I can tell you why it won't happen. I'll tell you why they'll fail. Because overwhelmingly, the people of Israel are united. They understand everything that I said here. Overwhelmingly. You should know that. It's important. And the second thing is...
Well, just to comment on that, I think that it is true that overwhelmingly Israelis want to fight the bad guys. The deal part, that part I'm confused about. That part I don't think that overwhelmingly people want that. But I think overwhelmingly Israelis do want to fight the bad guys and return the Jewish communities at least on the envelope of Gaza, and certainly in northern Israel, where they were kicked out of their houses by Hezbollah. So yes, Israelis are ready to fight. There's a very big esprit de corps, the fighting spirit of the soldiers. That part is right, and that part is why Israel will not be defeated, and of course with the help of God. But I think in order to really win, we need clarity of purpose and clarity of strategy about how we're going to fight this war, and we should fight it with no holds barred and not with hands tied behind our back.
We're committed to achieving our goals. All three goals. Destroying Hamas's military and governing capabilities, releasing all our hostages, and ensuring that Gaza does not become a threat to Israel anymore. And all these require standing firm on the things that will ensure the achievement of these goals. And with God's help, and with our people's will, and with the courage of our soldiers, we'll achieve all goals.
And I think that it's true that we will achieve those goals, but I say that we will achieve them better if we can speak with more clarity and the big picture. Because at the end, it's not satisfying. Defeat Hamas, return the hostages, and make sure that a Hamas-like entity will never come again. What you're saying is we're going to be at least militarily holding on to Gaza forever. And that's what we should say. We should say that with clarity. And we should say even more. This is Israeli land, and we intend to take it back up. We intend to resettle it, and we intend to kick out jihadist elements out of Gaza altogether. And only pro-Israel folks can stay in our land and certainly on our borders as well and not threaten us anymore. In simple terms, we have to say never again. We have to wake up and realize that we should have zero tolerance for jihadism in or around our borders. All right, let's see if we can have just a little bit of time. I want to keep this video to under an hour, so let's see if we can get one question in.
Prime Minister, thank you. The mother of, can you hear me, sir?
Sure.
The mother of Almog Sarusi, one of the murdered hostages, says you sacrificed her son on the altar of the Philadelphia corridor. If the price of your refusal to withdraw from the Egypt-Gaza border is more hostages are killed, is that a price you are prepared to pay? And is that a price the people of Israel will accept?
I can understand.
I just want to say that the guy who's asking a question is Raf Sanchez from NBC, who I know very well and is a very opinionated and one-sided reporter. But he asks a question, which is like, are you willing to keep fighting and to lose some hostages? As I said before, the answer is yes, because there's the hostage now, and there's the, God forbid, hostage tomorrow that we're trying to save from ever becoming a hostage. And so therefore we have to prosecute this war as though there are no living hostages, and we got to keep fighting as hard as we can. But let's see what the prime minister says.
The great torment that the mother of this murdered hostage feels. I understand her rage. I can understand her sorrow. So I'm not going to stand in judgment of that. I'm not going to argue with it. I'm just going to talk about the facts. I'm committed to getting all of them out. I got more than half out, and more than half of the hostages alive out because we employed the pressure points. We leave the pressure, we're going to get no one out. I'm committed as the Prime Minister of Israel to two things. They're right here. The first one is to achieve the release of the hostages, and the second is to protect the security of Israel and make sure that we have no more hostage taking, no more murders, no more rapes, and no more rocketing of Israel. Both of them. We have to have this and this together. That's what I'm going to do. And that's what I'm committed to do.
If I can follow up.
All right. Well, that was a very interesting discussion that we had a very interesting press conference that I think was very important for the prime minister to give. And I think that his images that he laid out were very important. There could have been even more images. There could have been images of the jihadist training camps and the brainwashing of children and the Hamas charter that calls to destroy Israel so that nobody could say this is a liberation movement of some kind. This is actually a jihadist, anti-Israel, religious, supersessionist, supremacist, neo-Nazi type movement that wants to destroy the tiny Jewish state. And I think that first image that he showed about the size of Israel within the region is very important and should be always discussed. And there's more and more. But I do think that the prime minister did an important job here at laying out his doctrine of what has to happen for Gaza and for his legacy, that he doesn't lose this war. And I think that he is indeed dead set in staying on the Philadelphia corridor, which is the corridor between Gaza and Sinai. And I think that every soldier that I've spoken to is like, we have to do that. We can't allow the bad guys to come back in through these tunnels. And we cannot allow armament to flow anymore into Gaza. We've got to wake up and not allow that kind of stuff to be levied against us. And we have to stop being suckers. We have to really be on top of this thing. With regarding to securing the hostages, I'm skeptical. And I think that the whole Bring Them Home campaign was a campaign that in the end worked in favor of Hamas because it kept being a pressure point against Israel fighting an all-out war, and instead is a constant pressure point to come to some kind of terms and agreements with the horrific enemy who did this in the first place. And I don't think that that's right. And number three, one of his point that there should never again be that kind of threat to Israel, that's only going to come through Israel actually holding on to this piece of land, governing it, making sure that jihadism isn't taught there and that armament isn't flowing into there. And that is, in my opinion, a clear sense of the future. But in any case, I think he lays it out maybe with a hint of what I'm saying, but not with full clarity for it. All right, folks, you are watching Yishai Fleisher TV, and I do thank you so much. And let's join in prayer that the leadership of Israel remains strong, and that the IDF remains strong, and that we will have in mercy the ability to release those hostages, but make sure that never again shall hostages be taken. And I also want to pray for the world, for those in the world who don't see the justice of Israel. I pray that your eyes are opened, and that God will get you a chance to be on the right side of history, not on the wrong side of history, not on the side of the jihad, not of the sheep, the wolf in sheep's clothing that tries to fake us out and say that this is about poor individual people and liberation and hurt Palestinians and children, that's all a way to weaken Israel and to also create a blood libel as though Israel is indiscriminately killing children, and not tell it for what it is, which is a war for Israel's survival, in which the bad guys would do much worse if they could only get a chance to do it. I hope that the world's eyes, and I think that there are many in the world whose eyes are open, and that they also see that same threat coming to a neighborhood near them. But I do pray for the world, the world who doesn't see that yet, and that they are victims of a great propaganda or an internal anti-Semitism that's just being vented right now. So B'ezrat Hashem will come to better times. In the meantime, Am Yisrael Chai, Am Yisrael Chazak. Israel is alive. The nation of Israel is alive. The nation of Israel is strong. Please feel free to write me an email, yishai@yishaifleisher.com. And also subscribe to our channels, whatever you're viewing on, if it's Instagram or Twitter or Facebook or LinkedIn or TikTok or our YouTube channel, Yishai Fleisher TV. So please subscribe. It's really easy, and it makes a big difference in your ability to connect to truth from the land of Israel. I am sending you God's blessings from this good land, and we pray to Hashem, to God, to give us the strength to continue the fight and to continue the great story and the great destiny of the Jewish people. Am Yisrael Chai. God bless you wherever you are. Lots of love from the land of blessings, and shalom.